Alright, hi. We're going to read the National Infrastructure Protection Plan of 2013, Partnering for Critical Infrastructure Security and Resiliency, Homeland Security. And it shows acknowledgments and a table of contents. Alright, you have your executive summary, introduction, evolution from 2009, National Infrastructure Protection Plan, vision, mission, goals, mission, goals. 3. Critical infrastructure environment, key concept, risk environment, policy environment, operating environment, partnership structure, core tenants, collaborating to management risk, set infrastructure goals, objectives, identify infrastructure, assess analysis risk, implementing risk management activities, measuring effectiveness, and 6. Call to action, step to an advanced national effort, build up partnership efforts, initiate, innovate management risk outcomes, and acronyms, glossary of terms. Appendix A, National Partner Structure. Appendix B, Roles and Responsibility Capabilities of Critical Infrastructure Partners and Stakeholders, and your figures in your tables. Alright, your executive summary. Let's just read this. Of our national well-being rely on the security of the resilient critical infrastructure of those assets of the system and networks of the underpinning of the American society, achieve the security and resiliency critical infrastructure partnership of the collective, identify with the priorities, articulate clear goals, mitigate risk, and measure progress, adapt based on feedback, changing environmental, the National Infrastructure Protection Plan of 2013, partnership with the Critical Infrastructure Security Resilience here, and they referred to as the National Plan. Guidelines in the national effort management risk of the national critical infrastructure community involved with the managing risk. Critical infrastructure is wide range composed of the partnership among the ownership of the operative, the federal, state, and local, tribal, and territorial governments, regional entities, non-profit organization, academia, managing the risk of the significant threats and hazards of the physical critical infrastructure require the integrated approach of the crowd of the diversity community, identify the detect, disrupt, prepare with the threats and hazards of the national critical infrastructure, reduce vulnerability, critical assessment system, the networks mitigate the potential consequence of the critical infrastructure incidents, adverse events that do occur. The success is an integrated approach depending on the leveraging of the full spectrum of the capabilities, expertise, the experience across the critical infrastructure community with the associated stakeholders. These require the efficiency sharing with accountability with relevant information among the partners to build the situational awareness and enabling and effective risk-informed decision-making. In February 2013, the President issued a President Policy Directive 21 of the Critical Infrastructure Security Resiliency, which is explicitly called to the update of the National Infrastructure Protection Plan. The update is informed of significant evaluation of critical infrastructure policy and risk policy operating environments as well with experience gained, lesson learned since the National Infrastructure Protection Plan was last issued in 2019. The National Plan builds up and previous National Infrastructure Plan by emphasizing the complementary goals of the security with the resiliency of the critical infrastructure. To achieve these goals of the cyber and physical security, the resiliency of the critical infrastructure asset system and the networks integrated into the enterprise approach of the risk management. The integration of the physical cyber security plan with the consistent with the Executive Order 1363-6 and improve the critical infrastructure cyber security with the direct of the federal government with the coordinate with the critical infrastructure owners, operators, improve the information sharing, collaborative development, and implementing the risk approach with the cybersecurity with the describing the activity managing the risk of the cross of the 5 national prepared mission areas, preventive protection, mitigation, response, recovery. The national plan also aligned with the national preparedness system called President Policy Directive 8, National Preparedness. With the context of the risk of the policy with the operating environment, the critical infrastructure sector, the cross-sector partnership with the structure to provide with the framework to guide with the collaborative efforts of the partner. The national effort for the strength of the critical infrastructure security and the resilience depend on the ability of the public and private critical infrastructure owners of the operative to manage the risk, inform of the decision line, allocating limited risk of the both steady and state critical crisis operations. The value of the partnership with the national plan begins with the direct benefits of the associated with the clear and shared interest in ensuring the security and resiliency of the national critical infrastructure, the baseline value of the propagated through a network of national, regional, state, local partnership between the government owners and operators who have the responsibility of managing risk with enhanced security resilience of the partnership of the being effective must provide a value to its partners participants. The value proposition of the government is clear with the coordinated with the infrastructural stakeholders is to achieve the government mandate, preserve public safety, ensure the national security and a great deal to secure its own infrastructure welfare for the communities government can succeed with the encouraging industry to go beyond the wood with the commercial interest to invest with the national interest of the activity engagement of the partnership efforts. For example, the government can provide for the private sector with the access of the timely, actionable, informative information responsible to developing threats and crises. And in addition, the government can help prevent private sector partnership with the game with more of the understanding of the entire risk landscape, enhancing the ability to make the informed efficiency, security, of the resilient investment. Finally, industry participating gain ability to help the government partners, government planners to make the better decision. Government security resilience initiative for the benefits occurring with a critical industry sector for the end of the nations as a whole. The nation critical infrastructure is largely owned with the private sector managing risk and enhancing security, resilience, and shared priority with the industry government. The national plan established with the vision and mission and goal of the support with the set of the core tenets of the focus of the risk management with the partnership influence with the future critical infrastructure security resiliency plan with the international, regional, and state, local, territorial, tribal, territorial, owner, and operator levels. The national plan builds upon the critical infrastructure risk of the management framework included with the 2006 National Infrastructure Protection Plan. Effective risk management requires the understanding of critically all assets and networks as well as the associated dependency, interdependency of the critical infrastructure. To do this end of the national infrastructure, they encourage partners to identify the critical functions, resource the impact of the business of the community for the support of the prepared readiness capability development. The heart of the national plan with its call for the action of the guideline of collaborative effort of the critical infrastructure community with the advance of the security and resiliency of three broad activity categories, building up the partnership involved in innovating with the managing of the risk of the focusing and outcome of the call for the action, provide with the strategic direction of the national effort for the coming of the years through the coordinated flexible implementation federal department and agencies collaborative with the state, local, tribal, and territorial, regional, and private sector partners as appropriate with the outcome driven national plan facilitates evaluation progress toward the critical infrastructure security resiliency through the goal of the priorities of the associated with outputs and outcomes. In conclusion, the national plan describes the national unity effort for the effective to achieve the critical infrastructure security and resiliency given with the diverse authorities, roles, and responsibilities of the critical infrastructure partner with the proactive, inclusive partnerships among all levels of the government, private, and non-profit sector that is required for the providing optimal critical infrastructure security with resiliency based on the guidance of the national plan with the partnership will establish pursue the set of the mutual goals, national priorities, and employ in common structured mechanisms, facilitate information sharing, and collaborative problem solving. One introduction. Our national well-being relies upon the security of the resilient critical infrastructure of those assets, the system networks underpinning American society with the purpose of the National Infrastructure Protection Plan of 2013, partnering with the critical infrastructure for security resilience. Here I'm referred to as the national plan with the guide with the national effort with the managed risk national critical infrastructure to achieve its end of the critical infrastructure partner must collectively identify the national priorities, articulate with clear goals, mitigate the risk from the measure progress, adapt with the base of the feedback, the changing of the environment, secure successful complex of the endeavor to leverage the full spectrum capabilities, expertise, and experience from the craft of the robust partnership. The national plan builds on the supersede of the 2009 National Infrastructure Protection Plan, recognizing the value of the progress of the mandate made to date with the protect with the national critical infrastructure, that reflect the change of the critical infrastructure risk of the and policy operating of the environments as informed and need to integrate with the cyber, physical, and human elements of the critical infrastructure of the mission managing risk. The national plan guides the national effort to derive the progress of the engagement of the broader community about the importance of critical infrastructure security and resiliency. The onset of this plan includes the wide range of critical infrastructure community comprised of the public and private critical infrastructure owners and operative federal department agencies, include sector-specific agencies, state, local, and tribal territorial governments, regional, ethnic, other private and non-profit organizations charged with the securing and the strengthening of the resilience of the critical infrastructure. Managing risk in critical infrastructure requires the integrated approach across the broad community. Identify, deter, detect, disrupt, prepare threat hazards to the nation's critical infrastructure. Reduce vulnerability to critical asset systems and networks. Mitigate the potential consequence of the critical structure instances of adverse events of the that do occur. Give the diverse authority for the roles of the responsible for the critical infrastructure partnership, flexibility, proactive, inclusive of the partnership with the requirement of the demands of the critical infrastructure security, resilience, the president policy, the Directive 21 notes, the critical infrastructure owners and operators are uniquely positioned to manage the risk of the individual individual operators assess assets to determine the effective strategy to make them more secure, resilient. Individual efforts to manage the risk enhanced by the collaborative public partnership with the operators with a unified national effort opposed to the hierarchical command and control structure of the personal President Policy Directive 21 stresses the disrupted nature of the critical infrastructure as well as the varied authorities of the responsibility of the partnership, noting with the critical infrastructure include distributed networks, varied organizational structures operating the modes, including multinational, international ownership, and interdependent functions, system of both physical space and cybersecurity governing construction of the involved with the multiple level threat authorities responsibility regulation. The national plan recognizes the public and private collaboration is built with the environment where the process of the information sharing and improving situational awareness remaining open and transparent while protecting privacy and civil liberties. The national plan takes in accounting of the varying risk of the management protective of the public and private sector with the government government and private industry is aligned with the design identical and interesting in the critical infrastructure, making it more resilient, leverages cooperative advantages to both public and private sectors. Mutual benefit of all of the national is organized in the following manner. Alright, Sector 2, Vision, Mission, and Goals. Outline of the vision, mission, goal of the critical infrastructure community. Section 3, Critical infrastructure environment. Describe the policy, risk, and the operating environments as well as the partnership structure of the community undertakes efforts to achieve goals aimed for the strengthening of security and resilience. Section 4, Core tenets. Describe the principle and assumption for the underpinning of the national plan. Section 5, Collaboration of the managed risk. Describe the common framework of the risk of the management activities conducted by critical infrastructure community with the context of the national preparedness. Section 6, Call to action. Call upon the critical infrastructure community to respect with authorities' responsibility of the business environments to take the cross-cut and proactive coordinated actions to support the collective efforts and strengthen the critical infrastructure security resilience of the coming years. Glossary and appendix. Several supplemental resources of the bill be offered to provide the guidance and system of the critical infrastructure community as part of the implementing of the national plan. Supplements will be standalone resources that will include, among other topics, executing infrastructure risk management approaches, connecting national security, cybersecurity, communications integration centers, national infrastructure coordinated centers, resources for the vulnerable assessments, and incorporated resilience in critical infrastructure projects. These will be available online, regularly updated for the easy access of the critical infrastructure community. Alright, evaluation from the 2009 National Infrastructure Protection Plan. The National Plan will continue to focus on the risk of the management foundation for the critical infrastructure security resilience, promotes partnership with the key of the mechanism with the risk of the managed. In doing so, the reaffirm the roles of the various coordinated structure that include the sector coordinated council, government coordinated councils, and cross-sector councils, building upon progress of the made up of the critical infrastructure sector resilience by those councils other than the past 10 years of the national plan. Elevate security resilience for the primary aim. Critical infrastructure homeland security planning efforts. Update critical infrastructure risk management framework and address the alignment with the national preparedness system across the prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery mission area. The focus establishing process of the critical infrastructure national priorities determined by the joint and by public and private sector and integrates cyber and physical security with the resilience efforts of the enterprise approach of the risk management. Affirms the critical infrastructure security resilient efforts requiring an international collaboration, support execution, national plan environment, achievement of the national prepared goals, both of the national community levels will focus leveraging regional collaborative efforts. President of the detailed call to action, which steps will be undertaken on the shape of each sector priorities in collaboration with critical infrastructure partners to make progress towards security resilience. Alright, Section 2, Vision, Mission, and Goals. The strategic direction of each of the efforts build and sustaining critical infrastructure security resilience is driven by the common vision and mission. Vision, a nation of the physical cyber critical infrastructure remaining secure and resilient with the vulnerability reduced and consequently minimize threats, identify the disruptive response and recovery hasten. Mission, strengthen security resilience of the national critical infrastructure managing physical and cyber risk of collaborative integrated efforts of the critical infrastructure community. The vision and mission depend on the achievement of the goal of the representative of the state strategic direction of the critical infrastructure activities should be focused on the next several years. Goals: assess the analyze the threat, the vulnerability, consequent of the critical infrastructure, and inform the risk of activities. Secure the critical infrastructure against human, physical, and cyber threats through sustainable efforts to reduce risk with the accounting for the cost of the benefits and security investments. Alright, enhancing critical infrastructure risk of the minimizing the adversity consequent of the incident of the adversing plan of the mitigation effort, employing the effectiveness response and save the lives of the enhancing the rapid recovery of essential services, share accountability, relevant information across the critical infrastructure community to build awareness and enable the risk-informed decision-making, prompt learning and adaptation during the after exercises and incident. The goals will be augmented regular development, more specific prior of the critical infrastructure partner related with the risk of management and critical capability enhancement. Based on the vision, mission, goal of the critical infrastructure community will work jointly with the specific national priorities with the concern with the resource availability, progress already made, known capability gaps, emerging risk, and the priority of this should be driven with the national and supplement with the sector, regional, state, local, territorial, tribal priorities, provided with performance will be set based on the goals and priorities of the national annual report, national preparedness report, include with the measurement of the progress that help to build on the common understanding of the state, critical infrastructure, security, resilient efforts within the relationship of these depicted in Figure 1. Alright, 3. Critical infrastructure and environment. National plan relies on the several key concepts that remain with the consistent with the 2009 National Infrastructure Protection Plan. At the same time of the plan, it is informed with the update with the reflect with the involved with the critical infrastructure risk of the policy of operating environment. The section describes the change of the critical infrastructure environment of the site since the publication of the National Infrastructure Protection Plan, with affirming the importance of the successful collaboration of the core partnership, the structure maintenance. Manage risk. Key concept. The key concept described below provide with the concept of the critical infrastructure environment, the understanding of these key for the concept that include with the state of the critical infrastructure, shape of the community approach for the ensuring security and resilience. Critical infrastructure represents system asset for the physical, virtual, so vital for the United States that incapacity for the destruction of such a system asset will be debilitating the impact on security, national economic security for the national public health, and safety of the aim of the combination of those man with the national plan and acknowledge for the national critical infrastructure largely owned, operated private sector for the however the federal and state, local, tribal, territorial governments also and operate critical infrastructure to do with the foreign entities of the company. Personally, President Policy Directive 21 defined the security of the reducing risk for the critical infrastructure, the physical means of the defense of the cyber measures and intrusion of the attacks affecting the natural and man-made disaster. Several elements for the securing critical infrastructure that include the addressing threats of the vulnerability with the sharing accurate information analysis of the current future of the risk of the preventing the protection against the contributing with the strength of the critical infrastructure sector. Resilience is defined in personal President Policy Directive 21 and the ability to prepare with the adapt the change of the condition with the same recover the rapidly with the disruption, and it would include the ability to withstand the recovery of the deliberate attacks actions of the national occurring with the threats of the incident that occur, having accurate information analysis about the risk and the essential to achieve the resilient infrastructure assess system networks that must also be robust, agile, and adaptable to mitigation, response, and recovery activities contribute to the strength of the critical infrastructure resilience, security, resiliency, strength of the risk of the management. Risk refers to the potential of the unwanted outcome resulting from the incident, event, of the occurrence, where they determine the likelihood, the function of the threats, and vulnerability associated. Consequent risk management, the process of identified analysis, communicating risk, and acceptance, avoiding and transferring control with the acceptable level of available cost. Partnerships enable the more effective, efficient risk management with the concept of the national plan. The partnership is identified with the close cooperation between the parties with the common interest, achieving the shared vision with the critical infrastructure community leadership involved in the open communication, trusted relationships as are essential elements of the partnership. Risk environment. The risk environment affected with the critical infrastructure of the complex uncertainty, threatens, vulnerability, consequences of are evolved over the last 10 years. For example, the critical infrastructure has long been subject to the risk associated with the physical threats of natural disaster, now increasingly exposed to cyber risk that stems and growing integration with the information involved with the communication technology with the critical infrastructure operation, versely focusing on the potential cyber vulnerabilities. Figure 2 illustrates the evolving threats of the cyber infrastructure. Alright, the strategic national risk assessment is defined with the numerous threats and hazards of the homeland security with the broad category of the virtually human call of the natural, technological, external threats. Critical assessment and system network faces. Many of these threats are categorized by the strategic national risk assessment, but include the terrorists and active the seeking to harm, to disrupt the essential services of the physical and cyber attacks, severe weather events, pandemic, influenzas, other health risk, or potential accidents or failures due to the infrastructure operating beyond its intended lifespan. The potential interconnected events of the unknown consequences add uncertainty to in addition to the known risk of the analyzed by the strategic national risk assessment. Growing interdependencies are critical infrastructure system, particularly with the resilience of the information, with the communication technology you have, and the grief of the potential vulnerability, physical, cyber threats, with the potential consequence of resolving with the compromising underlying system of the networks in an increasingly interconnected world with the critical infrastructure that currently crosses the national border with the global supply with the chain with the potential impact of their independence of the apply of the diverse side of the threats to do exploit them. In addition, with the effect of the extreme weather, the blows, the significant risk of the critical infrastructure of the rising of the sea of the more serve the storms, extreme and prolonged drought conditions over the year, flooding combined with the threatened infrastructure that passive, the essential for the serve the American public ongoing future for the change of the climate have potential compound with the risk of the could have the major impact on the infrastructure operations. Finally, vulnerabilities also may exist for the resulting in retiring workforce, lack of skilled labor with the skilled operation necessary for the infrastructure, maintenance of the therefore security, resilience of the various factors of the influence of the risk environment, along with the policy operating in the environments that create the backdrop against the decision made by the critical infrastructure security and resiliency. Policy environment. The Title II of the Homeland Security Act of 2002 has amended detail of the Homeland Security responsibility for the critical infrastructure security resiliency. But under the Act of Homeland Security must develop the comprehensive plan securing the national's critical infrastructure. The Department of Homeland Security with the first version of the National Infrastructure Protection Plan of 2006 and has estimated in 2009. Since of 2009, numerous national policies have continued to shape the nation's address critical infrastructure security and resilience and national preparedness. On February 12, 2013, the President of the President Policy Directive 21 Critical Infrastructure Sector Resiliency explicitly calls for the development and update of the national plan. The directive builds up the extensive work done to protect critical infrastructure, discover the national effort of the share of the information, reduce the vulnerability, minimize the consequence, hasten the response and recovery efforts of the relay with the critical infrastructure, also identified by the 16 critical infrastructure sectors listed in the box over the right. The president, which be chemical, commercial, facilities, communication, critical manufacturers, dam, defense, and industrial bases, emergency service, energy, financial service, food, agricultural, governmental facilities, healthcare policies, public health, information technology, nuclear, regulatory, materials, waste, transportation system, water, water and wastewater. Systems. President has issued Executive Order 1363, improving the critical infrastructure cybersecurity of the February 2013, which is called for the federal government to closely coordinate with the critical infrastructure owners operating with the improve the critical cybersecurity information sharing with collaboratively develop and implement the risk approach for the cybersecurity. Executive Order directs the federal government to develop the technology neutral cybersecurity framework, reduce cyber risk of the critical infrastructure, promote incentive of the adoption of the strong cybersecurity and practices, increase the volume and timeliness, quantity of the information shared required with the cyber threats, incorporating protection of the privacy and civil liberties for the critical infrastructure for the security and resilience of the initiatives. The national plan is aligned with the goal of the President policy of the Directive Number 8 of the national preparedness to secure the resilient with the national with the capability with the required with the craft of the community to prevent, the protect against, mitigate, respond, recover to the threats, for the hazards, for the pose, for the greater risk. The 5 the President policy Directive 8 mission areas are essential for the comprehensive approaching the enhancing national preparedness, critical infrastructure risk management activities across all 5 missions are contributed to achieving the national preparedness goal. In addition, to the national plan, and consistent with the national plan framework and interagency operational plans developed and pursuant to President policy Directive Number 8. The scope of the national plan is not met. It does not alter implementation, execution, prevention activities as described in federal interagency operational plan. The national plan scope of the compromised activities often support and prevention activities designed to avoid and prevent, stop, imminent threats and actual attacks. 2 additional policies documents are aligned with the national plan, that include the President's Climate Action Plan issued in June 2013, National Strategic Information Sharing and Safeguarding issued in December 2013, Climate Action Plan establishing national strategic objective with the directive of the federal agencies to take further action to better prepare America for the impact of the climate change, with including enhancing resilient infrastructure of the National Strategic Information Sharing, Safeguarding, and advised as one of the 16 national priorities needed to the established information sharing process for the sector-specific protocols with private sector partners to improve the information quality and the timeliness of the sector of the national infrastructure. Operating environment. Extend with the infrastructure, interconnected shape of the environment, the critical infrastructure security, resiliency, necessitation, collaborating with both planning and action. The nation's critical infrastructure has become the more interdependent and continuing to move from the operating environmental characteristics disparate systems, asset systems, and networks to the cloud, computing, and mobile devices, wireless connectivity with the dramatically change of the infrastructure as operative interdependency may be operational. All right. Power required to operate the water pumping station, physical or of the co-located uh, infrastructure such as water, electrical lines running in the bridge span of the interdependency may be limited to small of the urban and rural areas, span vast regions across jurisdictional national boundaries, including infrastructure required with the accurate with the precise position, navigation, timing. Position, navigation, and timing services are critical, but the operation of multiple critical infrastructure sectors are vital to incident response. The nation has benefited investment made with increased security resilience by both of the public and private sector owners and operative for the much of the critical infrastructure community continue to integrate with the cybersecurity with the core business practice of the making significant investment with increased security resilience in other areas. However, despite the public and private sector with the expenditure to operate to maintain critical infrastructure system level investment has not been adequate, so evidenced by deteriorating condition may be the infrastructure system in the name of the Access National Academy of Science reported that the nation's earlier heaviest investment of the design, construction, operation, critical infrastructure such as wastewater, wastewater, energy, transportation, telecommunications has not been matched the funds necessary to keep the system with a good condition, upgrade that meet demands of growing, shifting population. Critical infrastructure assets of the system of the network as well, for the key resource of the preside with a particular jurisdiction by the result of the information product of the service functions can be provided with the worldwide with the nature of the critical infrastructure ownership operations also the distributed need of the joint planning and investment is becoming the common of the necessary of the international level the global connection for the inform of the way of the critical infrastructure community should be planned to work together and within and across sector of the across jurisdiction national borders to increase the security resiliency of the critical infrastructure of the information of the security of the privacy of the coordination consideration officership of the operational environment the increasing of the availability of the data of the information essential operation maintain information with related technologies enable a more efficient and effective practice of the information vulnerability unauthorized access with a good effect confidential integrity availability of the distribution and such information into the use of them effective risk management remains challenged critical remains maintains availability information distributed with which who can protect probably this entails the transportation all of the information sharing practice protect source of the methods and ensuring privacy protecting civil liberties while enabling law enforcement and investigation. All right, the complex environment underscores challenging and the strength of the resilience of the national critical infrastructure because of the dynamic nature of the environmental ability. Consequently, partner to take advantage of the unique skills and capabilities across the community, remaining the foundation of critical infrastructure security and resilient efforts. All right, your partnership structure. Voluntary collaboration between the private sector owners and the operative, including the partnerships associated vendors and other government counterparts, have been and will remain primary mechanisms in advancing collective action toward the national critical infrastructure security and resiliency. The federal government must make the accommodate economic calculations risk with all of those considering with the non-economic values such as privacy, concern with addressing the national and homeland security. As a result, the government may have a lower tolerance to the security risk of the community with the perspective as legitimate, but in a world with resilience and critical infrastructure shared with the industry of the government, and the industry may be front of the lines of the national defense, such as the cyber activity sustainable partnership in order to develop the address and both perspectives. As the nature of the critical infrastructure risk environment, we conclude with one of the entity managing risks entirely of its own partnership with the benefit of the active of the knowledge of the capability of the would otherwise unavailable to them. Most many critical infrastructure sectors have been worked in established able with the representative of the partnership managing transition leadership of the broadening of the range of the members. Skill set with the need to accomplish collective goals in addition from the trusted relationship with the information chain of the federal agency with a better understanding of the risk and preparedness posture associated with the critical infrastructure. This allows the entities to become more informed decision of the identified address of the national critical infrastructure priorities. Participation in this effort is based on the clear and shared interest of the ensuring the security and resilience of the national critical infrastructure. Understanding the cooperative advantage of each element of the partnership can achieve the shared interest. National plan organized the critical infrastructure in 16 sectors, designating federal department agencies to lead the coordinated sector-specific agencies for each of the sectors of the appendix B with the role, responsibility of sector-specific agencies of the sectors and cross-sector partnerships council structures described in the National Infrastructure Plan, Protection Plan, remaining foundation of the National Plan, and are depicted in Table 1. All right, your sector and cross-sector council structures include sector coordinated council, self-organized, self-learned, self-governed, private sector council consisting of the owners and operative with the representative. They interact with a wide range of sector-specific strategies, policies, activities issued with the sector coordinated council, serve as the principal collaboration points between the government and the private sector owners and the operative with the critical infrastructure, security, resilience policy, with the coordinated with the planning of the range of the related with the sector-specific activity. Critical infrastructure cross-sectors council consisting of the chair of the vice chairs of the Secretary Coordinated Council, the Private Sector Council, coordinated with the cross-sector issue of the initiative of the interdependencies to support the critical infrastructure security resiliency. Government Coordinated Councils consist of the representative across the various levels of the government, including the federal and state, local, and tribal, the territorial, as appropriate, of the operating landscape of the individual sector of the council, of the interagency, intergovernmental, the cross-jurisdictional coordination within the across the sectors, partnership with the Sector Coordinated Council and the public-private efforts. Federal Senior Leadership Council, consisting of the senior officials of this sector-specific agency, of the other federal department agency with the role of the critical infrastructure security resilience of the Federal Senior Leadership Council, facilities, communication, coordination on the critical infrastructure security resiliency of the federal government, state, local, tribal, territorial government coordinated council, consisting of the representative of the across the state, local, tribal, territorial government entities of this and the state, local, tribal, territorial government coordinated councils promote the state, local, tribal, territorial partners, national critical infrastructure security resilience efforts to provide the organizational chart to coordinate with the across the jurisdiction, state, and local government guidance and strategic strategies and programs. All right, Regional Consortium Coordinated Council, RC3, compromise regional groups of the coalition of country engaged in the various initiatives of the advanced critical infrastructure security resiliency with the public and private sectors. Information sharing organization, including information sharing and analysis center, and serve the operation and destination of many centers of the subsector to other groups, facilitating sharing of the information between the government and private sector. The Internet Information Sharing and Analysis Center also collaborates on cross-sector basis of the National Council. Note Appendix A further describe the function of the above the partnership structure as well as additional support with the National Critical Infrastructure Security Resilience. Are the sector crosses the sector partnership approach with the describe the above the design of the scalable allow the individual owner of the operative of the critical infrastructure of the other stakeholders across the country to participate. It is intended to promote the consistency of the process that enables efficient collaboration between these disparate parts of the critical infrastructure community, allowing the use of the viable partner structure for the planning process with the concept of the approve the successful and leverage with the state, local, and tribal territorial levels as well as within and across the region to build, form, and expand the existing networks and identify the proven practice of adapt and adopt lesson learn and leverage practice and process and plans as appropriate. Many of the listed structures advantage with the Critical Infrastructure Partnership, the Advisory Council, the Secretary of the Homeland Security, with the Critical Infrastructure Partnership, the Advisory Council, of the 2006, with the mechanism of the directly support with the sector's interest to engage in the public-private critical infrastructure decision, participate with the broad spectrum activities with the Critical Infrastructure Partnership, the Advisory Council, except for the partnership need from the Federal Advisory Council, with the allowing the public and private the critical infrastructure community with the engage with the free and frank and the sensitive dialogue to mitigate with the critical infrastructure vulnerability, lessen the impact of developing and emerging threats, specifically within the Critical Infrastructure Partnership and Advisory Council with the form of the federal government deliberation. Critical infrastructure issue that is needed to arrive at a consensus position with the making the formal recommendation. The Critical Infrastructure Partner Advisory Council may be either the sector, cross-sector, or working group level, depending on the topic of deliberation. Purpose of the other federal agencies also may have the utilize the FACC, the Federal Advisory Committee Act, except for the committee of the Advisory Council that engage with the private sector with the Critical Infrastructure Partnership and Advisory Council model provides the legal framework for the cross-sector collaboration. All right, 4 core tenets.